The Tiele, also named Chile, Gaoche, or Tele, were a confederation of 9 Turkic peoples living to the north of China and in Central Asia, emerging after the disintegration of the Xiongnu confederacy. Chinese sources associate them with the earlier Dingling people. The Tiele were a collection of tribes of different Turkic ethnic origins, largely descended from the Chile, presupposing a Tiele-Tingling identity back to the 3rd century BCE. Tiele are related to modern Teleuts people. Chilean Gaoche. The name Chile and Gaoche first appear in Chinese records during the campaigns of former Yan and Dai in 357 and 363 respectively. However, the protagonists were also addressed as Dingling in the records of the southern dynasties. The name Gaoche was a nickname given by the Chinese. By the time of the Rouran domination, the Gaoche comprised 6 tribes and 12 clans. The Gaoche migrate in search of grass and water. They dress in skins and eat meat. The cattle and sheep are just like those of the Rouran, but the wheel of the carts are high and have very many spokes. The progenitors of Huihe were Xiongnu because of the custom of riding the high-wheeled carts. They were also called Gaoche during the Yuan Wei times, or Chile, which is an alternate name to Tiele. One group known as the Eastern Gaoche probably dwelled from the Onan River to Lake Baikal. However, the relationship with the rest of the Gaoche and its tribal components is unclear. In 391, the Rouran chief Hejuan was killed by the Tuaba Northern Wei. Hejuan's brother Shelin raided several tribal dependencies of the Tuaba in retaliation, but reportedly suffered a serious defeat in 399, and was forced to flee westward. Here Shelin defeated the Hulu tribe and subjugated them. With the aid of a Hulu named Chiluhou, Shelin conquered most of the Gaoche tribes and proclaimed himself Khagan of the Rouran on March 11, 402. Many Gaoche, such as Chiluhou, were promoted to establish better control. During the reign of Shelin and his successor Datan, the Rouran pushed as far as the Isikul, where they defeated the Wusun and drove them to the south. In the east they raided the Northern Wei before they were defeated on June 16, 429. Afterwards, as many as 1.5 million Gaoche were said to be captured and settled to areas adjacent to the capital Pingchang in the south. After this settlement they were called the Western Chile, including a section of the Ordos Desert south of the Yellow River known as the Hexi Chile, the Eastern Chile, between Wuzhou and the capital suburbs, and the Northern Chile, to the north and around the borders. The greater part of the latter two possibly fled back to the steppe and were not heard of after 524 and 445 respectively. The Western Chile clan rebelled between 524–526, moved further south and were eventually assimilated. With the loss of numerous subjects and vital resources, the Rouran went into a temporary decline. However, in 460 they launched new campaigns in the west, destroying the remnant of northern Liang. During a campaign against Khotan in 470, the king wrote in his supplicatory letter to the Toba emperor that all of the statelets in the west had submitted to the Rouran. In 472, Yusheng attacked northern Wei across the western border. By the time of his death in 485, Yusheng had restored the Khaganate to a status even more powerful than the times of Datin. During these wars, a southwestern Gaoche tribal group known as the Fufu Luo united 12 clans and rebelled, but were defeated by the Rouran. They escaped and established a state northwest of Gaochang in 487. For then on, little is known about the rest of the Gaoche until the Turks. Fufu Luo. The Fufu Luo were a Gaoche tribe of 12 clans, dwelling close to the Gaochang kingdom, allied with the Tuba. In 481, the Fufu Luo began to interfere with the Gaochang and deposed one of the kings. After the death of Yusheng, his belligerent son Dulin fought more wars against the Tuba. After a disagreement, Fufu Luo betrayed him, and in 487, together with his younger cousin Xiongnu, they managed the clans of over 100,000 yurts to escape from the pursuing armies, led by Dulin and his uncle Nagai, by defeating them. After they settled, he founded a statelet under the title of Ulu. Like the later Kibian Zue and Chuo in 605, the Fufu Luo divided the rule between north and south at the Dzungaria. The Fufu Luo allied with the Northern Wei in 490 and fought against the Rouran until 541, when they were dispersed by them. Shortly after the death of Dulin in 492, several important cities on the eastern route were taken by Fufu Luo, separating the Rouran from the west. With the elimination of Rouran-influenced Teleuts, kindred steppe nomads, for the first time extended the domain as far as Garish, where Xiongnu was killed and his son Matu was taken hostage. After 507, the Teleuts uninterruptedly sent 18 embassies with gifts to the Chinese courts, as opposed to only one in 456. Like Peroz I and his son Kavad I earlier in the west, the Teleuts helped Matu. He returned to his realm, and Bilian, the successor of Fufu Luo, was overthrown by his tribesmen, while shortly paying tribute to the Tuba. In 508, Fufu attacked the Fufu Luo and gained a victory, but was killed by Matu on his course back. Later in 516, Xiongnu, son of Fufu, defeated Matu and in reprisal had him towed to death by a horse. The Fufu Luo went for several years into exile under the refuge of the Teleuts. In 520, Xiongnu was repulsed by his younger brother Yifu, who restored the realm. After his defeat, Xiongnu returned to the east, where he was killed in a coup in which the ruling clan of Ulu was split into two factions. In 521, the Fufu Luo penetrated into the Rouran territory, but were finally repulsed by 524. Thereafter, the Fufu Luo suffered a series of defeats from Anagui before being annihilated in 541. During the final decade, they helped the Eastern Wei to fight the Western Wei in a civil war. After defeat, the nobility surrendered to them. Rulers of Gaoche-Tiele, emergence of the Tiele. The term Tiele appeared in Chinese literature from the 6th century to 8th century, and most scholars agree that Tiele is simply different Chinese characters used to describe the same Turkic word as Chile, although some scholars disagree on what the specific original Turkic word may be. In 546, the remainder of the Fufu Luo, now called Tiele, rebelled and were defeated by Buman Khan at Dzungaria. Around 250,000 of them were then incorporated into his army. In 552, Buman Khan sent his army and defeated Anagui just north of the Chinese border. 2 years before his death, he eliminated the remnants of the Rouran to the north and subjugated the Tiele. According to Sueshu, the Tiele consisted of over 40 tribes divided into 7 locations. The forebears of the Tiele belonged to those Xiongnu descendants having the largest divisions of tribes. They occupied the valleys, and were scattered across the vast region west of the Western Sea. At the area north of the Deluo River are the Pugu, Tongluo, Via, Begu, Fuluo, which were all called Sijan. Other tribes such as Menchen, Turua, Siji, Hun, Hu, Zhu and so forth also dwelled in this area. They have a 20,000-strong invincible army. in the regions west of Iwu, to the north of Garish, and close to the White Mountains, come the abodes of the Kibi, Boluoji, Yedi, Supo Nahe, Wuhuan, Hegu, Yedi, Yunawan, and so forth. They have a 20,000-strong invincible army. Passing over the Gold Mountains to the southwest are the Zue and Chuo, Diele, Shipan, Daki, and so forth. They have an over 10,000-strong army. Leaving these, we come to the regions north of Kang, close to the river Ada. Here dwell the Hedi, Heji, Bouagan, Juhai, Hebixi, Hekuo, Suba, Yemo, Kida, and so forth. They have a 30,000-strong army. At the west, to the east and west of the Daisi, are the Sulu, Hazan, Sue, Miecu, Longhu, and so forth. They have an over 8,000-strong army. When we reach to the east of Fulan, are the Enku, Alan, Beiruz, Jialili, Fuahan, and so forth. They have a near 20,000-strong army. Lastly, in the regions south of the Northern Sea, dwell the Dubo and some other tribes. The names of these tribes differ, but all of them can be classified as TL. The TL do not have a master, but is subjected to the both eastern and western Tujue respectively. They don't have a permanent residence, and move with the changes of grass and water. The main characteristics are, firstly, they possessed great ferocity, and yet showed tolerance. Secondly, they were good riders and archers. And thirdly, they showed greed without restraint, for they often made their living by looting. The tribes toward the west were more cultivated, for they bred cattle and sheep, but fewer horses. Since the Tujue had established a state, they were recruited as the auxiliary of empire and conquered both east and westward, annexing all of the northern regional lands. The customs of the TL and Tujue are not much different. However, a man of the TL lives in his wife's home after marriage and will not return to his own home with his wife until the birth of a child. In addition, the TL also bury their dead under the ground. The TL were a large tribal group, however, it is unlikely they would have been under a unified leadership. References of the tribes in the remote areas west of the Pamir Mountains were sparse and mentioned only in passing. Some tribes like the Alans were probably erroneously added. By the end of the 6th century, nothing more was known about them. Those tribes in the eastern areas, such as the Guligan, Juolangziji, and Baixi, were being rewarded afterward, though a few like the Fuluo, Mencheng, and Tura disappeared. Like the Gokturks, the TL were probably one of many nomadic Turkic peoples on the steppe. As some scholars noted, the name TL and Tujue were semantically more or less alike. The name was first interpreted as Tolus by Chavan and Thomson, but this was pointed out as inaccurate in 1937 by Sanjongmian, as Tolus applied to the Turkic title of official in the east that also came to be attached to the Kagan. This view was later supported by Onagawa Hidemi in 1940, who also speculated on a TL origin for the Ashina clan. The TL were ruled by the Gokturks during the mid-6th century and early 7th century. Many of the tribal chiefs were expelled and some were killed during this period. They allied themselves in a rebellion against the Gokturks during the turmoil between 599 and 603. This might have already started as early as in 582, when rumor was spread about a revolt in the north when a raiding campaign led Ishbara away from the capital. Among the rivals of Ishbara in the west was Tardu, son of Istami. He allied with Bapia Khan, a Kagan at the northern Dzungaria and Kov River, and declared himself independent. In 587, Bagha Khan, heir of Ishbara, captured Apa with the help of the Chinese but died the next year on a campaign in the west. Later on, Dulan took over his reign, and in 599 he, together with Tadu, launched a civil war against his son Geman, who sided with the Chinese. However, he was unsuccessful and was assassinated during his battles with the Chinese. His partner Tadu took over and launched a revolt against the Khaganate. In 603, he was revolted against by the Tiele tribes, provoked by the Chinese, and fled to the Tuyuhun. Earlier, when Apa was captured, Nili took over from him, but he died after the defeat of Tadu in the east. His son Heshana Khan succeeded him in the western Khaganate, levying heavy taxes on the Tiele. To prevent a revolt, he gathered several hundreds of chiefs and murdered them. In 605, an alliance among the Tiele under the Kibian Zue and Chluo tribes was formed to overthrow him. They captured most of the Dzung area and defeated his occupying army, taking several important cities, including Kumal, Karashar and Gaochang, pushing Heshana Khan further west to the lower Ialai River by 607. After victory, the Kibi chief Dingling was proclaimed as the Khagan by the tribes and the Zue and Chluo chief Yidi Khan as subordinate Khagan. At the same year, Dingling allied with the Chinese to defeat the Tuyuhun to resolve a conflict at Dunhuang. In 611, Shekui, a Khagan from Tashkent and grandson of Tadu, attacked Chuluo and forced him to escape to China. The return of Shekui marked the end of the rebellion, although exactly when the rebels were put down is uncertain. One Chinese account indicated that the Gaochang kingdom still remained under the vassal until the year 612. They were most likely subdued after this year as Shekui restored order in the western Khaganate. Failure to put down these uprisings led to a fatal division within the Gokturks ruling Ashina clan. Under the leadership of Shenshlu Khan in 628, grandson of Yeshibo, the Zue and Chluo made the crossing over the Altai, and quickly founded a confederation with the rest of the Tiele at the east. The Zue and Chluo founded a short-lived Khaganate over the steppe under Zhenshu Khan, his son Duomi Khan and nephew Yite Wushi Khan, the last of which eventually surrendered to the Chinese. Chinese subjugation. Shortly after 646, the Uyghur and the rest of the 12 Tiele chiefs arrived at the Chinese court. They were bestowed either with the title of commander-in-chief or prefect under the loose control of the Northern Protectorate or pacifist North, whose seat and name changed at certain times. The Uyghur were prominent among the Tiele tribes next to the Zue and Chluo. The name first appeared in 390 as Yuanhe. Under the leadership of Pusa, son of Chief Tekyen, the Uyghur Gao cooperated with the Zue and Chluo to make a stand against the Eastern Khaganate. Soon after his death, his successor Tumadu formed a new alliance with the Chinese and turned against his former ally. Thereafter, Tumadu was granted a Chinese title like the rest of the Tiele chiefs, and carried the title of Khagan among the other tribes, who now annually donated furs to the Chinese to fulfill the tax obligations. In 648, Tumadu was murdered by his nephew Wuhe and another tribesman named Juluobo. Both were son-in-laws of the Chebi Khan, the ruler of the eastern Khaganate at the northern Altai, who now held hegemony over the surrounding tribes, including the Kaluk. This alerted the Chinese, and Wuhe was assassinated by Aruz upon receiving his uncle's position from the Chinese deputy in the north. Later Juluobo was detained by the Chinese. On November 17, Perun was granted his father's title. Since their submission, the Tiele had participated in several campaigns under Chinese leadership, under the command of Ashina Xie, Yuan Laikan, Gao Gan, Liang Jiafang, Cheng Zhiji, Su Dingfang and Xiao Saiyu. This resulted in the capture of Chebi Khan in 650 and the end of the Western Khaganate in 657, except for a last campaign at Gaoche which probably killed Perun. During those campaigns, visits would be paid to restrain the tribes. In 658 such a visit was repelled, and a revolt broke out in 660 starting with the Siji, Beigu, Pagu and Tongluo. The reason for this revolt is unclear, perhaps due to the Chinese repression of the surrounding tribes during the campaigns. 2 years later the revolts were suppressed by the Chinese at the upper Salinch River around Cangai. The battle was short, and a massacre was said to be committed by the two leading commanders. According to one exaggerated account from Tang Huiyao, around 900,000 surrendered tribesmen were slaughtered, though it is certain that a large number of them were captured. After the event, a message was sent to the north to appease the restless Tiele. In 669 similar unsuccessful revolts had been made by the Zhui and Chuo, but the details of these are vague. The last revolt was mentioned in 686, led by the Pagu and Tongluo to join with the Ashina clan, who had formed the Second Turkic Eastern Khaganate under Iltrisad in 682. They were immediately suppressed by an army dispatched from Julian. A number of them were moved to that region along with the seat of the protectorate under the jurisdiction of Ganzhou. Earlier during the rebellion, contacts between the Northern Protectorate and the Chinese capital were cut off, and the only way to pass was through the area of Suzhou. Rise of the Uyghur Khaganate. After the disintegration of the Eastern Khaganate in 630, many Gokturk nobles were resettled either at the Chinese border or in the capital. Some went on to participate in frontier campaigns for the Chinese. In 679 a major rebellion was led by 3 Gokturk nobles. Among them, Ashina Nishafu, a direct descendant of Ilig, was chosen as the Khagan. They were quickly subdued by the Chinese and the leader was betrayed and killed by his own troops. The rest of the Gokturks managed to escape and allied themselves with Ashina Funyan for a new rebellion. Funyan declared himself Khagan in 681, but his revolt did not succeed and more than 50 participants were executed on November 16 at the Chinese capital. The remaining rebellious Gokturks formed the Second Turkic Eastern Khaganate under Iltrisad and his 5,000 supporters. They were mostly active in the southern region bordering China at Mount Kogama-I. Over the decade they held countless raids across the Chinese border. Exactly when or how the Tiele came under the subjection is unclear. However, during this period, a number of pro-Chinese Tiele groups who had earlier cooperated with the Chinese against them, such as Uyghur, Kibi, Siji and Hun, escaped into the Hexi corridor and eventually resettled to Liangzhou. According to the Tony-Akukan Kultigan or Korn script, the Gokturks made 5 out of 47 attacks on the Tiele, who were led by Iltris. Among them, 4 seem to have been mere raids, while the last attack could be seen as the re-subjection on the northern steppe. The estimated date for the Tiele's submission to the Gokturks would be around 687, probably without much resistance. The establishment of a second Gokturk capital at the foot of the sacred mountain Otukan brought unrest to the Tiele tribes. After the Uyghur chief was killed, they were recruited for their annual raiding campaigns over the Chinese border after 694. These raids were halted in 708, as the Chinese constructed fortifications along the Ordos. Raids continued elsewhere as Capagan turned his attention to the west and the Turkic and Teleuts tribes between 708 and 715. By this time, some of the Tiele had escaped into China and were settled in Lingzhou and elsewhere, while others like the Beigu had revolted in 707. These revolts continued until 716, and Capagan, on his way back from suppressing revolts by the Uyghur, Tongluo, Baixi, Beigu and Pagu, was ambushed and killed by a Beigu tribesman named Jezilu on July 22. In conclusion, not all tribes were involved in the revolts. Two of the northernmost tribal allies, the Guligan and Dubo, did not participate in any of the revolts. Soon, Bilge Khan took over the reign and, together with Tonyakuk, began to appease the subjected Tiele. Tonyakuk was born in China and was considered a wise statesman in both Turkic and Chinese accounts. Meanwhile, a friendly relationship was built with the Chinese. Till the end of the Second Eastern Khaganate, only one raid in 720 was made on the Chinese border. Bilge Khan started to call for a return of the former members of the Tiele tribes who had settled in China. He had risen in status among the tribal chiefs, especially the Uyghur within the Khaganate. During this period, many Tiele had betrayed the local Chinese authorities and fled to the north, in particular the 5 communities around Liang, Ling, Chia, Feng, and Bingzhou, while minor insurgencies had occurred throughout the process. Among the returning Tiele tribes was the Uyghur, specifically the Yaluoj, who had escaped into China until 727. The Yaluoj consisted one of 9 clans of Uyghur, and had dominated probably for 6 generations since the fall of Zhou and Chuo. After Bilge Khan was poisoned, there were factional struggles within the ruling clan. Within a few years, an alliance was established between the Basmail, Uyghur and Teleuts. They overthrew the Gokturks and killed the Khagan. Most of the heirs were killed subsequently. At the same time, the Basmail chief, who was approved as Khagan, was overthrown by the allies. In 745, the exiled Khagan of the Gokturks was killed by an Uyghur chief named Qiluf Boiler, son of Hashu. He founded the new Uyghur Khaganate under the title of Qiluf Bilge Kul Khagan. The name Tiele and the 9 allies, or Tokugawas, is not mentioned afterwards, and was probably replaced by the name Huihu in historic records. From then on, the Uyghur consisted of 7 former Tiele tribes and 2 new tribes, while 8 former Tiele tribal names had now disappeared.